So now if we move to the next agenda item and look at some of the organizational change management tools that will allow you to mitigate some of the challenges. Here are some of the things that can be used. When we look at these challenges, as we just talked about them, the five we just talked about, you have the conspiracy of silence, and one way to address that conspiracy of silence, or if you'll remember, that's the withholding of information or not getting to the source or the root cause of resistance. One way to address that is through organizational readiness assessments, and we typically do those via an online tool that we use. We also do focus groups and one-on-ones to support the quantitative data that we collect in the online surveys with some of the qualitative information we capture there. So the intent with these readiness assessments is to really understand where the resistance is, why it's there, and ultimately to determine what needs to be done to address it. When you look at the we go live when situation, change impact assessment is one thing that's very important. So in fact, that's just important no matter what. Forget these five issues. Change impact assessment is crucial, and so many companies fail to understand how important that is. And really, what that is that's where you're looking at your future state process, which most companies are keen on focusing on, but you need to understand what the gap between that way of doing things is and the way that employees are used to doing things. And you want to build your communications messages and your change management strategy around addressing those gaps and making sure you're closing those gaps. So that change impact assessment is important, as is the training needs analysis. And what these two tools will do is they will help you understand how big the bread box is and help you understand how much change management activity needs to go into your effective implementation. And that's why it's so hard to oftentimes determine a realistic implementation plan or budget before you've done the blueprint process, or what we call the blueprint process, where you're essentially designing the new business processes and then doing that organizational gap analysis, because that's really going to tell you how long it's going to take. And a sales rep will tell you, hey, we've had other clients that have done it this fast, or we think you can do it in this amount of time. But the reality is no one really knows until you've gone through that whole blueprint process and gone through that change impact analysis. So that's one risk or one tripping point that a lot of companies struggle with, and that, quite frankly, is why so many companies go over budget and spend more time than expected, because they expect that initial proposal they got from the sales rep was accurate, and that's going to be the final answer, and that's what they ask for when they go to the board. And then as they get into things, they realize, well, maybe that was overly optimistic, and now we've got this bigger bread box to deal with. So those two tools are very important in helping alleviating some of those uncertainties and risks. When you talk about time to process, that's where the communications plan and the OCM charter become very important. Again, it's just with the thought process here that you want to make sure you're communicating all of the changes via multiple communication vehicles to employees well before training starts. And then when you look at bottlenecks, that's where, again, this is kind of overlapping with project management and PMI best practices and whatnot. But when you look at, RACI chart and just defining who's responsible, accountable, consultant, informed for any given activity in a project plan, that's going to help identify, where the resource constraints might be and where some of the challenges might be. And then finally, walking the talk. Making sure that you've got the milestones and metrics charts, but more importantly, and it's not listed here, but I think it's more important, you want to make sure that you have key touch points with between your executives and the entire organization about the project, and just to make sure it's reinforcing some of the messages of why the company is embarking on the ERP initiative and why it's so important to the organization. So if we look at a little bit of what we just talked about here, this is a broad overview of just some of the tools that we use. We use diagnostic tools at Panorama, ranging from your organizational readiness assessment, your change impact assessment, process change matrix, and proficiency testing. And then we also use development tools like your change management charter, communication plan, training needs analysis, etc.